middle of the state was clobbered. So we're working on looking at Panhandle and other surrounding areas as we put those resources to keep out of harm's way.
But has it changed your focus about where those resources might possibly go then once the storm clears through?
Yes, yeah, that has. I mean, every time the storm shifts, it creates a slightly different hazard for different parts of the state. So every single time we analyze it to see what the impacts might be.
Governor Scott, sir, in light of all you've said, not just today, but in the last several days, how concerned are you that some Floridians are still taking this storm too lightly?
Well, if you look, here's my biggest concern is the storm surge. And as you know, this track has moved a little bit west. And so the storm surge has increased on the southwest part of the state. And I just 2 hours ago, I was down in Fort Myers and talking to them, and they, in their evacuation zones, they know that everyone's not going to evacuate, and that bothers me. I want everybody to evacuate. That's why one of the reasons I've been going around the state to let people know the importance of evacuating. Now, here's what's going to and goes. Now we're getting it, so we're going to have to change. We need more. We're going to have more. I'm sure we're going to have more people going to shelters now on the West Coast than we thought, 24, 36 hours ago.
Sorry to interrupt, but speaking of evacuations, do you guys have a working estimate right now for, even in a ballpark term, how many people have been ordered to evacuate? Just even ballpark. How many people are we talking about on the roads, moving north, that kind of thing?
No, but we can go back and take a look at that. And like the governor said, it has changed recently with the addition of greater storm surge zones in southwest Florida. So we'll have to work on that number for you.
How do you prepare for this, though, if you don't have sort of even just a general sense of it, as it develops and as it
I'm not saying the numbers don't exist. We have plans that highlight all of those and highlight what the different evacuation zones look like and who are in them. I just don't know on this exact scenario right now what number that is.
And this is done by county. I mean, we are working. So what we do is we have calls. We know exactly what each county needs are. We have emergency management teams in each county. So when they say they're going to evacuate this number of people, it gives us, and they say, okay, we need this many more shelters. And we have shelters where we believe people are going to stay in their county, and we have shelters that we know people are going to leave that might be in a county where we don't believe there'll be a lot of people that go to a shelter. So we've got both of them, and so we deal with all that, and then we know exactly how many people are going to shelters, and so we open up shelters constantly around the state. Yes, Gary.
Governor, you spoke earlier about keeping Floridians informed, and I'm just confused about one thing. The documents here in your own meeting said that the decision on shoulders was made last night, yet you didn't generally inform the public until this morning in your initial briefing. So I'm a bit confused as to why the delay if the decision was made to do the shoulders last night. I mean, did you have signs up on I-75 telling people they could do it?
Absolutely. Everybody on the road knew when we opened the shoulders. If you're on the highway, you know when the shoulders are open.
Wouldn't it have been good to let everybody know?
If you're on the highway, told everybody all along, go to fl511.com. You can follow the signs. We are doing everything we can on the roads when we opened up the shoulder to let them know.
Can you talk about if you reach a point where everybody is evacuated that should have been, and yet the roads are still full of people. At that point, if there's no more need to bring resources down to South Florida, is it possible that you will do what Georgia did and allow for contraflow, or is that absolutely out of the picture?
We're gonna continue. Let's stop and think about what's going on. We're in the middle of an emergency. This storm is changing. We're finding new needs all the time. We're solving those needs as quickly as we can. We are going to continue to evacuate people as fast as we can. We will deal with our highways and how we get people through the system and through the highways as quickly as we can, whether it's figuring out where the fuel is, whether it's doing shoulders, whatever we're going to do everything we can to get everybody evacuated. Now, as this storm goes north, We want you to be safe, and we're going to tell you it's not going to be safe to be on the road. So we're going to do everything we can because I want everybody in the state to survive this storm. And so we're going to put out information and try to help people make sure they make good decisions. Thank you, everybody.
Governor Rick Scott once again addressing the media from Tallahassee. Persistent questions over the last few days, really, about whether or not both lanes of, say, the Florida Turnpike should be open, the northbound lane and the southbound lane, to allow northbound flow of traffic. And they say they simply don't want to do it because they need southbound flow of goods, material, and personnel. And again, it's because of the unprecedented size of the storm and the way it will affect the state, which is basically most of the state. From south to north, and you're talking millions of Floridians, though they wouldn't give a number, but when you start adding up the number of people, it's easy to figure from Miami-Dade County, Broward, Palm Beach County, the most populous region of the state, then over the Tampa Bay area, given what they're dealing with now. And of course, the governor brought up again, the storm surge is his single biggest worry about the potential for loss of life. And people need to heed those warnings both here and now increasingly exactly, on this current track. Now it's a West Coast issue for sure. Real quickly, because I know I've heard him on all of his briefings mention how we need volunteers, and some people have reached out saying, okay, so what do we do? Here would be a simple way to get some information about that. It's all through Volunteer Florida. That's the lead agency that will be coordinating volunteers and donations before, during, and after the storm. volunteerflorida.org/Irma. If you want more information about that. A lot of Floridians are being asked to and will step up, as we always do. We'll be back in a moment.
You were just telling me, Michael, of some friends who left the state, and I've talked to a lot of people who have left the state, and it's a big state of Florida to drive from north or south to north. And I'll tell you, with that much traffic that people have seen on the East Coast, that it just makes it an interminable drive.
And again, based on what we're hearing, although a lot of traffic has gone up the west side of the state, but given what we're seeing with the latest tracks in the last few hours, you can anticipate that may grow exponentially. And it's all part of the questions the governor's been getting, because at a certain point, the road system's only built for so many cars, and a storm this big, compelling so many people to think about or be ordered to or to evacuate, is a challenge unlike any the state has ever seen.
Exactly. And if you are just getting home, just getting your television on, you may have seen some alerts on your phone, but we want to bring in Steve Weigel right now, our chief meteorologist, and give us the very latest, because there have been some definite changes that have happened over the last couple hours, Steve.
Yes, encouraging for us, and definitely we hope that these trends continue, for at least for our area. The west coast of Florida definitely has a higher threat of strong damaging winds as this hurricane gets closer, and it looks just unbelievable on the satellite loop tonight. Look at that. A little dry air, though, I see, is getting entrained on the western side. That could be just a temporary thing that's going on, but whenever dry air gets anywhere near the center, you watch for some weakening, because hurricanes like their own atmosphere, if you will. They want that rich tropical moisture completely wrapped around the center, and this it still looks, in the eye wall looks very well protected. So, you know, this hurricane with 155-mile-an-hour winds. But you can see the high clouds are already starting to stream in across South Florida, at least down around the Keys, and pushing into Miami and into Lauderdale. We'll get some of those high clouds in the next few hours too. But the bulk of the rainfall and the strong winds stay to the south through tonight and tomorrow. Here's the timeline. So there's Saturday. This storm makes a very close call with Cuba. It stays just off the coast, and it'll be interesting to see if it does weaken at all. And the official forecast actually has it bumping up to a Category 5, 160 miles an hour. So this is Sunday morning. This is just after midnight. And there, the lower Keys, there's Key West. So it tracks across the lower Keys, potentially a landfall as a Category 5. It's only happened 3 times in recorded history in the U.S. Where there's been a U.S. Category 5 landfall. And then as we get into Sunday afternoon, a second landfall as a 4 or 5, officially a 4, the official forecast. But always, intensity forecasts are problematic. So I always tell people, the most likely scenario here is a 4 making landfall, but you could see something on the lower side of 3, or you could still see a 5. The winds at this point 145 miles an hour, and then tracking very close or right over Fort Myers. Now this is its closest approach to us on this current track. Now west at 12, 155, and this is a Sunday afternoon through about the mid-evening hours. It's picking up speed at this point, forward speed, so that'll work in our favor. Anything that we do get here will move through pretty quickly. I mean, it's still going to be 6 to 10, maybe 12 hours, but it's definitely moving through. It's not a Francis like we dealt with in 2004, and it's not a Harvey, which left the tremendous rainfall installed over Texas. So there's a Sunday evening, and there's Lake Okeechobee. And if you remember last night, the tracks were right over Lake Okeechobee, so this has shifted a few miles to the west and closer to eventually Tampa. So here's the track a little farther out. There's Tampa there, and there's Gainesville there. Now it says a 4, but what's happening here is this is going from a Category 4 down around the Everglades to a tropical storm by the time it reaches North Florida. This is Monday afternoon. So it is not a Category 4 going across Gainesville. It's likely a strong tropical storm, but maybe a Category 1 hurricane as it moves into this area here. So there's a point where it's Monday afternoon. And yes, Orlando and Gainesville, they're going to see some impressive weather with this, likely power outages too. I mean, it covers the entire state. We're seeing a track like this, just amazing. And here's a look at the computer models as we get into the early evening. These will update. Most models update around 8, 9 o'clock tonight. I don't know if it matters in this case. The Hurricane Center is leaning so much on the European model. That updates about 2 to 3 in the morning. They're pretty much just following that to the rule, and the European model is right under that official forecast, working very close to Fort Myers, and then eventually up around to the east of Tampa later Sunday. It looks like Sunday evening at this point. Watches and Warnings, they've been changed since earlier today. We have a hurricane warning for the entire viewing area from Sebastian and Vero down through Port St. Lucie, Stewart, and back into the Keys and all the way back through the West Coast, all the way up into Anna Maria Island, and a hurricane watch past Tampa, heading up around Swanee River, which is around the Big Bend area of Florida. So that's the hurricane watch now. And these are our probabilities of tropical storm force winds developing on the weekend. Essentially, it's Saturday night through Sunday. Almost 100% chance around the lake, very, very high across the coastline. So these are winds at 39 miles an hour stronger. And when you get into strong tropical storm force winds, historically, those are when we see power outages here. So this is still a threat with those. But the hurricane force wind probability has dropped. It's about, a little less than 30% on the Treasure Coast and a little less than 20 in Palm Beach County, but it is higher around Lake Okeechobee, almost a 50-50 chance in spots, and obviously much higher down around the Fort Myers area. We'll have to watch this area. These numbers will likely climb if it stays on this track. I think along the coastline, these are the numbers that will stay unless we see a shift back to the east. And let's talk about that because there's still a chance of it shifting. We saw shifts back to the West Coast today. We cannot rule out the possibility that we're going to see the shifts come back toward the east later tonight or tomorrow before it makes landfall. There's still the chance of that. We are still, the entire viewing area is still in the error cone heading in through the weekend. There is a slight chance for tornadoes with this. There are really four weather situations that you get into with a landfalling hurricane. One is rainfall, storm surge, obviously the wind damage, and the tornado threat. And there is a tornado threat Saturday and into Sunday as the storm moves through the area. Here's the wind field. Tropical storm force winds, about 40 miles an hour stronger, arriving across the southern areas of Palm Beach County. There's the timeline there, so that's Saturday evening. And if you've been watching for the last couple of days, even yesterday, this arrival time was about 3 in the afternoon on Saturday, so everything has been held back almost 6 hours now, and then working up across the Treasure Coast after midnight, just before sunrise in most spots around Fort Pierce and Vera. So this is Sunday morning. You're starting to see the tropical storm force winds develop, and then the stronger winds start to work in on Sunday late morning. And the peak winds should be about mid-afternoon to late afternoon. So tonight, still some gusty winds, but not a bad evening. Tomorrow morning looks fine. Tropical storm conditions developing late in the day. I just showed you the timeline. So tomorrow evening for Palm Beach County and then overnight for the Treasure Coast. And then those winds pick up. We have 39 to 73 miles an hour. That's a tropical storm force criteria, and then possible hurricane conditions a little higher around the lake on Sunday afternoon and evening. Heavy rain, the feeder bands coming in. We don't talk about the rain all that much, but 5 to 8 inches of rain possible with this storm, maybe higher in some spots. It will cause some flooding because it's so much rain in such a short period of time, but it's nothing like Harvey. We're not expecting anything like that. That's 30, 40, 50 inches of rain. This is much less, but because it comes down in such a short period of time, it will cause some street flooding. So at this point, we're in the warning. Hurricane conditions expected within the next 36 hours. A little higher, though, back around the lake compared to the coastline.
Steve, quick question. When is the next time that people at home and we can expect an update from the Hurricane Center? Would it be 11 o'clock tonight?
No, we'll get one at 8. We'll get an update, an intermediate advisory, they call it. It won't change the track,
right,
but it could change the watches and warnings, and it could also change the wind speed, the current wind speed, and the direction, and some of they're flying planes into the storm, and those planes are sampling the atmosphere, so that all that data is put back in the computer models, but it also is updated for the 8 p.m. intermediate advisory. Now the computer model runs will come out mid-evening, and then a new track comes out at 11 o'clock. Sometimes I get questions, well, why don't we do new tracks every hour? Because these computer models are run on supercomputers, and it takes about 4 to 5 hours for the actual computer run to go through the whole process before it's used.
Interesting.
It's interesting. The whole dynamic you've talked about all week, Steve, this Bermuda high, this trough, all of it coming together one way or the other as we get down to really the 0 hour in terms of its impact on our peninsula and what will ultimately happen. And that's why you've been so cautionary about possible weather surprises that could still come.
Yes.
And all of us need to be on.
And we talked about that earlier. When you think of the West Coast, everyone in Fort Myers and Tampa 2 days ago was thinking, well, we're in the clear here. There was nothing to worry about because they were right on the edge of the error cone. And now they are looking at this thing coming in. And I caution you, and I'm cautiously optimistic that the track stays west, but it could shift east again. We are still in the error cone here.
None of us are in the clear
That's
is the important advice there. Steve, thank you so much for your analysis, as always.
We are awaiting a briefing from the Palm Beach County Emergency Operations Center. They were waiting for the governor to do his briefing, and we understand there's a conference call going on. We'll go to that as soon as it begins. But we do want to go back to a story and to our Wanda Moore right before we went to the governor, and that was about Publix closing in a couple of hours, all stores over South Florida. Wanda, I know there's been a rush to get the last buying in.
Absolutely, Kelly. We have a little more than an hour left to finish all your last-minute shopping, and a lot of shoppers are doing just that. What have you found in the store? Have you found everything you needed?
Yes, we found everything we were looking for.
Shelves still pretty empty, some of them.
Yes, for like water, ice, but other things are there, like chips, soda, juices. Those are there.
So have you have already stocked up on all the essentials?
We have our shutters up. We're all set to go. The only thing we don't have is the generator, but everything else is good to go.
So just today was just last minute supplies?
Yes, just a couple of things, like some snacks for my son and so forth.
All right, well, thank you so much. Stay safe out there.
Okay, thank you. You too.
So you can see people are rushing to the store just to get those last minute supplies. And I just was in that store. It is pretty empty when it comes to water and other supplies. They're closing today at 8. And that changed from originally tomorrow around noon. And now they pushed that further up because of they're watching the storm. And they said they needed to do that. All right, we're going to send it back to you now.
Wanda, thank you. And we want to check in on the Palm Beach County Emergency Ops Center. A news conference underway right now.
People that, and we all fully recognize that even though the storm has moved a little bit to the west, we know at any time it could take a right-hand turn and come directly across the state and impact Palm Beach County. Please continue to complete your plan and hunker down and rest assured that in Palm Beach County we have a wonderful team of qualified, experienced, and seasoned people that are working on your behalf to make sure that you are safe and prepared. I'm going to turn this over now to Ms. Virginia Baker.
Good evening. Virginia Baker, County Administrator. This is our 7 o'clock update almost. Palm Beach County Emergency Management officials continue to actively monitor Hurricane Irma and its progress towards South Florida. The Palm Beach County Emergency Operations Center went into full activation, level 1 this morning, which means we will be fully engaged until after the storm. Please, as the mayor stated, do not become complacent and assume the worst is over because the storm has tilted a little bit more to the left. Although the current model favors a more westerly track, this storm has been extremely unpredictable. Curfews. Beginning Saturday at 3 p.m., a countywide curfew will be in effect until further notice or modification. A person must have a legitimate purpose for being out past curfew hours. In addition to the curfew, the state of emergency also prohibits the sale and distribution of alcohol as well as the sale and display of firearms. This curfew is to ensure the safety of all citizens in Palm Beach County as well as personal property and businesses in our county from looters and individuals taking advantage of the aftermath of Hurricane Irma. The Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office and all law enforcement within municipalities will have zero tolerance for looting. Evacuations. Mandatory evacuations remain in effect for all residential structures in Palm Beach County in Zone A, which includes mobile homes, low-lying areas prone to water intrusion. Zone B, which generally includes all the barrier islands, land areas north and south of Jupiter Inlet, and other surge vulnerable areas along the intercoastal waterway. A voluntary evacuation is in effect in Zone C. Zone C generally includes properties from the intercoastal waterway west of US 1 in South County and Central County, and areas close in proximity to the Loxahatchee River and the northern tip of the lagoon. The Glades area around the lake still remains in a mandatory evacuation zone. This includes the entire lake region, including the communities of Lake Harbor, South Bay, Belglade, Pahokee, Crooked Lake, and Canal Point. These evacuees were bused to shelters in areas on the other side of the county. Pickups began at 10 a.m. this morning at Lakeshore and Pahokee Middle Schools. The evacuees were taken to Seminole Ridge High School and John I. Leonard High School, respectively. The last bus was scheduled to leave at 5 p.m. today. However, we will keep a few buses in Pahokee Middle School and Lakeshore Middle School this evening until 7:30 p.m. to pick up anyone that is still remaining. We will, in an abundance of caution, return tomorrow morning and provide an evacuation shuttle service from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. After that, we will terminate all evacuee services. Please, if you are there, do not hesitate to catch the evacuee shuttles so that you will be safe, you and your family. We actually transported approximately 800 people today from the Glades area to shelters, as I stated, Seminole Ridge and John I. Leonard High School. So I'd like to thank our partners, the school board that assisted PalmTran in transporting our residents. The approximately 800 people being transferred does not include figures for private transports. If you are not in an evacuation zone, please shelter in place. Emergency shelters are open, and they've been open since 10 a.m. this morning. We have approximately 11,632 people at this time in our shelters. And we again caution you not to wait until the last minute to go to the shelters. We still need shelter volunteers, so if you are interested, please call the United Way Volunteer Hotline. That number is 561-375-6621. PalmTran Connection made more than 3,500 trips today, transporting some of our region's most vulnerable citizens. In addition to evacuating citizens today, PalmTran conducted a sweep of neighborhoods near Lake Okeechobee to help as many citizens as possible reach the shelters. PalmTran's general fixed route service will end this evening at 8 p.m. Limited fixed route services will be offered in the Glades area. If you have flights, airlines at the Palm Beach International Airport will be providing their own individual schedules through their corporate public information. The last scheduled flight, JetBlue, will depart PBIA at 9:04 p.m. tonight. The airport terminal will be secured at 10 p.m. The airport is not an authorized shelter. The traveling public should contact their individual airline for any flight scheduling information. For continued information on Hurricane Irma. And for more information on Palm Beach Division of Emergency Management and Hurricane Preparedness, please visit www.pbcgov.com/DEM. Follow us on Twitter at PBCDEM and watch PBC Channel 20 and all of our partners here with the TV stations locally. So we thank you, and we're able to answer any questions that you have.
Hi, I know there was one filter at capacity. Are there any others? Or just one at this point?
Only one at this point.
Which one is that?
Independence Middle.
What about pet-friendly shelters? Are there any open currently?
Yes, we've got, actually we've expanded the service, and we have roughly about 2 areas open for pet-friendly shelters.
Are there any pets that you won't be accepting to those shelters? Like any specific
We will not be accepting any exotic type animals. So it's primarily dogs and cats that we will be accepting.
And we're also hearing that only one pet owner will be allowed to go to the shelter. Is that correct?
That is correct. That allows us to expand the capacity to a number of others, because if we put too many people in, then that limits the number of pets that we can allow in.
And will pets be separated from their owners? People will be on ships to feed them, so to speak?
Yes, they will be able to come in and walk and feed their animals. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Continue our coverage here of Hurricane Irma this evening. Good evening to you once again. I'm Shannon Cake along with Jay Cashmere here in studio now, and Virginia Baker just doing a bit of housekeeping there from the Palm Beach County EOC, buttoning up some details about the shelters, talking about last-minute supplies for your home, certainly reiterating the mandatory evacuation areas for Zone A, mobile home parks, low-lying areas, Zone B, if you're in a Zone B evacuation area in the county. That would include all barrier islands and surf-vulnerable areas as well. You likely know where those are, and if you're curious about whether you're in a Zone A, B, or C, you can go to our website right now, WPTV.com. You can locate that. She also reiterated a few details about Sheriff Rick Bradshaw and his intention to enforce the zero-tolerance policy for looting as well.
And one of the main concerns that they have are citizens living in and around the Glades. A lot of intel coming in from that today. 800 people were bused from the Glades to Seminole Ridge High School and John I. Leonard High School. There's another bus headed out there tomorrow as well. That will be the last run, though. After that, everything will cease, and then of course, everyone will sort of batten down the hatches, so to speak, and get ready for the arrival of Irma in whatever fashion at that point. Where the forecast is at that point, we certainly don't know. And again, also PBIA, the last JetBlue flight, 9:04 tonight, and that'll be it. PBIA will then shut down operations, completely close, is not a terminal, and will effectively close off to any flights. When it will open will be up to the airport authorities, and of course, the aftermath pending the weather situation to come. Speaking of this storm, and speaking of some of the images that are coming in, the hurricane hunters have been through the storm multiple times. They're doing constant runs day by day. This is video that they took just a few hours ago heading into the hurricane here. If we're looking at this, it appears the eye wall there, and you can see just the size and the dimensions of this. There's so much critical data coming from each of these flights, and not just the video that's poured out from these flights, but the little cylinders that are dropped in, and all that data comes back to the National Hurricane Center and is then flushed out into critical data that's given to our meteorologists. They can study and interpret and really give you sort of a mile-by-mile, minute-by-minute account. Now, as the storm gets so closer, the meteorologists have a better idea, a better understanding of this, the dimensions of this.
That is just
really the intensity of it. And at the end of the day, that's what we're looking at. And of course, the forecast track. And, you know, Irma represents such a mind-boggling experience here, because we've talked about this turn that's set to happen sometime tomorrow. Steve's indicated, they're studying the next 24 hours of this. We've watched this windshield wiper effect back and forth, and let's not let our guard get down because we've watched this shift west, but we know certainly this could shift back east. We will feel some impact of this no matter what. We've given the probability of the tropical storm force winds versus the hurricane force winds, but nonetheless, just there's the dense composure of these images coming in from the hurricane hunters.
And this is the most recent flight that has just come into us, this video circulating back into us. It is unbelievable to think about what these guys are doing. Steve Legal is bringing you into the conversation here. And as Jay mentioned, the data that you're able to get out of a flight like this.
It's invaluable. These guys usually fly about 10,000 feet. I've met a few of them at the Hurricane Center in the past, and they've told me about some pretty wild flights they get in. One of the interesting things is they told me that actually some of the bumpiest flights are the ones that are the weak tropical storms that are trying to develop because the winds are all over the place, and it's a little easier to fly through these well-developed hurricanes, even the strong ones, because you know which way the wind's coming, usually right at you, or there might be a crosswind, but it's kind of a consistent, extremely strong wind, whereas the tropical storms they're swirling all over the place. They're trying to get a little more structure to them. Well, this one certainly has a lot of structure. This is a Category 4, 155 miles an hour, and it's moving toward the west. It's 2 miles an hour less than Category 5 hurricane, and it is moving along the north coast of Cuba the next about 24 to 36 hours, and then there's a little bit of a turn after that, well, actually a pretty big turn in toward the Keys. Now, this is a 5, so it intensifies again to 160 miles an hour, and then it makes a landfall on the Keys, likely as a 4 or 5, and then another second landfall. And that landfall on the Keys, at this point, I took a close look at the maps, is not Key West, but it's just to the east of Key West, so the lower Keys. And then a second landfall close to Naples and Fort Myers. It works up over Fort Myers or just to the east of Fort Myers. And if you've been watching for the last few days, which I suspect you have, because this is, of course, a massive story for our area, and their official forecast right on top of it in the last couple of days, and then racing up the coastline, well, not so much the coast, actually right up in the middle of Florida. So there is, Orlando's going to be on the right side of the track where they're going to see some very strong winds, and then Gainesville will also see some very heavy rain and strong winds, and Tampa will too. And then it's up into North Georgia very quickly by about Tuesday. So what a storm track. Now, we're still in the error cone, but obviously today a little more encouraging for us because it has made that shift to the west. And the strongest winds, the most damaging winds are right around the center, right around that eye wall. Category 4 at this point, and then the computer model tracks, and they'll move a little bit. Can't sound the all clear yet because it's still hundreds of miles to the south. And it is still, we're going to see these tracks continue to move back and forth. Hopefully a little bit more consistency. They're all lined up together. I mean, that's a very, very tightly clustered. Every global model is within about 20 to 30 miles there. But we could see these shift back to the east or even farther west and more off the coastline in the Gulf of Mexico. That's what we're going to be watching this evening. That's the key. Where do these evening model runs eventually end up? So right now, all of our viewing area is still in the error cone, but it just hugs the coast. That eastern side of the error cone hugs the coastline up the east coast. Okay, hurricane warning. This is one of the new changes with the new advisory. Hurricane warning for the entire viewing area, all the way back up through Anna Maria Island and all the way down through the Florida Keys. And then a hurricane watch north of that. The probability of tropical storm force winds about 40 miles an hour stronger, pretty likely, even at the coast, because tropical storm force winds right now stretch out 185 miles from the center. So a storm over here, our winds go way out to the Bahamas and they go way out in the Gulf of Mexico. So those are tropical storm force winds. Now the chance for hurricane force winds, which right now stretch out 70 miles from the center, would put that kind of on the edge. Over the lake, there's a higher chance because of that. At the coastline, these numbers have lowered since yesterday, and then obviously the west coast, there's a higher chance too. And this will all climb 58%. And like, well, it's not roughly 50-50. That's not too bad. But the storm is still way down there, and as it moves closer, I suspect these hurricane probabilities will bump up in a big, big way. There are also a tornado threat. So you get four big weather situations with a hurricane. Obviously, the strong, damaging winds. You get the storm surge, and you get the threat for tornadoes and the threat for flooding. Tornado threat will be around Saturday and possibly Sunday as it moves to the north. So that's something that we're going to be watching. You need two things for tornadoes: warm rising air and wind shear. You know, winds going in one direction and aloft going in a different direction. You get that natural spin, and that's what happens right at the coast. So that's going to be something we'll watch on Live Viper 5 Max most of this weekend. So the arrival time for these winds would be Saturday evening in Palm Beach County, and then overnight Saturday and into Sunday for the Treasure Coast. These are the tropical storm force winds, and on this track, the strong hurricane force wind should stay around the lake, but any shift to the west or to the east, and we're dealing with stronger winds again. Actually, James has been putting together a few graphics to kind of give a better idea what we can expect through the weekend.
Yeah, you talked about that tornado threat. So first, let's try to go through time here on Vipercast and see what's going on as we get into tomorrow. Here's where the storm is now, and as we go through the day tomorrow, you see a lot of these bands, these feeder bands that are right around this, will start to pivot in the area. So in any of these, at any time, we could have some quick tornadoes start to spin on up. And then as you see this now, for us here by overnight, say Saturday night into early Sunday morning, our weather really starts to pick up as the core of the storm starts to get closer to the Keys. We'll see our rain pick up, torrential rain blowing sideways, and the wind will pick up too. And then as we get into Sunday morning, you see a whole lot of rain moving through the area. We could pick up a good 8 to even 12 inches of rain from this as it moves on through and then moves up to the north. Let's time out the wind gusts too, and for your area where will be worse. Now, and the wind direction too. So on Saturday, say Saturday through the day, starts to pick up. We start a little bit lower in the morning tomorrow, and then we pick it up to about 40 miles per hour, which is tropical storm force by 9:30. Notice the wind pretty much straight out of the east, or maybe east-northeast. Then as we go through time here, we get into Sunday morning. That's when the storm is getting closer. The winds pick up even more. We shift that wind more out of the east-southeast blowing on in, and you see the wind gust potential here pretty high up over tropical storm force, and of course Boca a little bit closer. You'll be a little bit stronger there. Then we get to the peak of the action here, which will be sometime Sunday afternoon through the evening hours in there, and we see the wind generally coming out of the southeast for pretty much everybody. So I think our strongest winds here in our area will be southeast to south, the direction of it. And you see as the storm is now up here, all our wind coming straight out of the south, very gusty winds here. You see in the 70s here with hurricane force gusts, not sustained winds, but that can cause some damage too. Worried about the top part of the lake here, the northern part of the lake by Okeechobee. All that water could start to pile up there and cause problems to any communities that just hug the coast. Okeechobee City, and then farther down, there's a couple little communities there that definitely need to keep an eye on there. And then as this pulls off, our wind turns a little bit more southwest, but you see the numbers start to drop then.
James, what does that mean in terms of if the track stays the same as it is right now? What does it mean in terms of storm surge based on those winds you just showed us?
So storm surge now for us isn't too terrible. With the winds coming more out of the southeast like this, doesn't really give a whole lot of time to pile up.
Bye.